I was the empress. I laced my lips with poison and forced a kiss on the imperial consort. Now we've both been reborn, and the way she looks at me is getting weirder by the day. Imperial consort. Sure, you're beautiful, but we're both women.
1.
As you can see, I'm an empress. In my previous life, to put the emperor at ease, I pretended to be at odds with consort Hihongye. She was the daughter of a general, I was the daughter of the prime minister. In the harem, she reigned with strength, I with intellect. We were rivals in every sense. Let me put it this way. If she tripped on her way out the door, she'd suspect I'd wax the steps outside her palace. In truth, we didn't have any real blood feud. The harem wasn't about winning or losing. Whoever's family dragged down the court less had the upper hand. In the end, my family was implicated in a political scandal. That mud of an emperor said, since we were once husband and wife, he'd be kind enough to leave my corpse intact. Before I died, consort he came to see me one last time. She said I was the loser, but she hadn't won either. I had vacated the empress's position, but she didn't get it. Instead, her cousin Himyenyen swooped in and took the prize. She poured me a drink herself. My father was forced to retire. My brother lost both his legs. The emperor promised generous rewards, made my uncle a marquis, and handed the empress's title to the cousin I've hated since childhood. Siawaner, I spent my whole life fighting you, only to end up doing all the work for someone else's benefit. On paper, she saw me off, we shared our regrets, and that should have been the end of it. Grudges laid to rest with my death. Once I drank the wine and passed on, she'd return to her palace and begin her own drama sequel, Harem Wars 2. But life loves a plot twist. I thought I'd make a grand final exit, standing tall as I drank the poison wine. What I didn't expect was that Hihongye's personal maid would suddenly shove me. And just like that, my lips landed straight on Hihongye's. When I started foaming at the mouth, she was mid-eye roll. Right before I died, my last thought was,
Wow.
that poison hit hard.
2.
As for how I came back to life, don't ask, I've got no clue. All I know is when I opened my eyes, the first face I saw was that damned Emperor Li Yuan. Luckily, survival skills in the harem are top-notch. Even in a situation like that, I could still manage a convincing smile. At that moment, I didn't realize I had been reborn. Given the mess I made in my past life, I assumed seeing Li Yuan again before death was just karma, making sure I got what I deserved. Then I saw Hihongye sitting below. From the way I knew her, there was no doubt. We were both in the same boat. In that split second, our eyes met. We raised our cups at the same time. I toast Her Majesty the Empress/Imperial Consort. Hihongye took a graceful sip and said with a smile, "Today is this concubine's birthday. To have His Majesty and Her Majesty here to celebrate, it brings me overwhelming joy." Li Yuan chuckled, teasing, "You're unusually well-behaved today, Hongye. Turning a year older really makes a difference." His Majesty loves to tease me. What she really meant was to remind me of the current timeline. Year 3 of the Jianan reign, my 7th year as Empress, her 2nd year in the palace. The 15th day of the 6th month, her birthday feast. Last time around, I toasted her and left after a few bites of food. In the palace, birthdays belong to whoever's celebrating. The emperor is their gift. I didn't dare linger, lest people think I wanted to steal her thunder. But today, not only am I stealing the spotlight, I'm stealing the consort from right under the emperor's nose. Ignoring the surprised looks around us, I and Hihongye began an awkward charade of sisterly affection. Hihongye said, "Her Majesty has cared for me for many years. I'm deeply grateful." I returned her fake politeness with a forced smile. "Consort He, you're too kind. We're like sisters after all." "Your Majesty, dear consort, see, this is why she and I are perfect rivals, always well-matched." She immediately turned to the emperor and said she wanted to share a bed with me tonight, to deepen our sisterly bond. This concubine and Her Majesty met too late in life to be true sisters. Li Yuan's face looked like he hadn't pooped in 30 days, utter despair. He struggled to find the words. Beloved, you and the Empress will have plenty of time in the future. No, I cut him off, goosebumps rising all over as I grabbed Hihongya's hand. When the wine flows freely between true kindred spirits, one night isn't enough. Tonight, I will drink with the consort till dawn. Exactly. This concubine will risk it all for a night with Her Majesty. Li Yuan was silent for a long time before finally staggering off, as if he'd lost his will to live. The look in his eyes screamed, when the hell did my Empress manage to brainwash my consort? Once the Emperor left, the other stunned concubines gradually followed, leaving only our palace maids behind. Given what her maid did last time, we both, without needing to say a word, dismissed everyone else. Before leaving, my personal maid gave me a big thumbs up.
3.
Outside the window hung a full moon. Inside, two restless souls sat face to face. Hongya and I stared at each other, both utterly baffled. This whole situation was far too absurd. We had no idea where to even begin. Do you think we were resurrected? I asked. Or is this just some strange flicker before death? Hongya sighed. Well, if our shadows are this solid, I doubt it's an illusion. Fair enough. I asked. So, what's your plan now? In the last life, my father and brother were taken down. This time, I'll make sure my family is prepared before anything happens. She glanced at me, surprised. Your father would go along with that? I smiled faintly. That depends on my skill, doesn't it? She arched a brow and let out a cold chuckle. Last time, Li Yuan used the lives of my entire family to pave the way for my cousin. This life, as her sister, how could I possibly let her wait so long? I'm planning to have her enter the palace early to serve His Majesty. We shared a meaningful smile. As husband and wife, I said, if the Emperor likes another girl, who am I to keep her hidden away? Why not bring her out in the open? All of us were pawns battling it out in the palace, so why should he Mian get to reap the rewards without lifting a finger? Your cousin is just a side character, not worth worrying about. The real game is His Majesty. Hongya curled her lips into a cold smirk. We're nothing but chess pieces in the Emperor's hand. That maid of mine? When she wasn't sure I was fully dead, she still held me down and forced half a cup of wine into my mouth. I blinked. Palace rules dictated that our personal maids were hand-picked confidants. Hongya was cautious to a fault. There's no way she'd keep someone untrustworthy by her side. You mean? She was planted by the Emperor from the start. Li Yuan, you absolute monster. You and I died, and suddenly his path to his beloved was clear. He used our lives to pave the way for someone else. Hongya tapped her bright red nails against the table, one beat at a time. How touching, the devoted Emperor and his lovely lady. I could cry. I dabbed at the corner of my eye with a handkerchief. Truly so moving. Well, since fate's given me this second chance, I won't let Li Yuan or my cousin live in peace. I'm going all in. Just don't get in my way. Me? Excuse me? How am I supposed to respond to that? Who's got time to get in your way? If you hadn't kept picking fights with me, I wouldn't have bothered with you in the first place. Hongya's eyes widened. She actually pointed a finger at my nose, throwing all hierarchy out the window. That first year I entered the palace and fell during a dance. Wasn't that your doing? Complete nonsense. I refuse to take the blame for that. I don't care who the Emperor favors. I'm the Empress. Why would I care whether you're dancing or doing flips? She narrowed her eyes. And in the third year of Jianan, when I lost my baby, wasn't that you too? What does that have to do with me? Back then, I didn't even dare set foot near your palace. She leaned back in her chair, dazed, and after a long pause muttered, but I always thought it was you.
Right.
And who investigated all that? Haidang, wasn't it? And what Haidang says, isn't that just what His Majesty wants you to believe? Haidang was Hongya's personal maid. Once she said that, everything clicked into place for me too. Li Yuan, your front court's a mess, and now you're stirring up chaos in the back palace too. Truly, no emperor is ever normal. Even though I spent years fighting He Hongya out of duty, never did I imagine Li Yuan would go out of his way to manufacture conflict where none existed. Wrong as the timing may be, I almost feel like applauding him.
4.
After exchanging notes with He Hongya, we realized just how thoroughly Li Yuan had played us all these years. For a moment, I even wondered if I was some clueless tribal princess from the northern border. How else could I have been duped for so long? He Hongya didn't waste time. Just 3 days later, she had her cousin summoned into the palace. It was a beautiful afternoon when my maid Xiao Tsui burst into the inner hall, breathless. "Your Majesty, something's happened." "What is it?" She took a moment to catch her breath, then said, "Consort He and Lady Lin went for a walk in the Imperial Garden. Behind the rockery, they found. My eyes lit up. "Speak up." "They found His Majesty embracing Consort He's cousin in a most indecent state. Rumor has it her red embroidered undergarment was hanging off the Emperor's belt." I fought to keep the corners of my mouth from curling up. Forcing myself to recall Li Yuan's revolting face, I stood and changed clothes. "Lead me there at once." Such shameless behavior. How could a girl act like that? By the time I arrived, He Mian had already gotten dressed. She was bowing her head, weeping pitifully. Lady Lin cowered in a corner, practically praying I wouldn't see her. Can't blame her. These days, anyone who catches the Emperor in a compromising position wants to run for their life. "Your Majesty, this is highly inappropriate," I scolded. I was overcome with passion," Li Yuan stammered. At this point, his grip on power wasn't as firm as later on. He always tread carefully around me. Today, even more so. "I heard Consort He's cousin was still an unwed maiden." Consort He, don't blame me for saying this, but you should really pay more attention to your family's upbringing. He Hongya, seated beside me, let out a long sigh. "Your Majesty is right. Technically, seducing the Emperor is punishable by death. But since she's your cousin, and His Majesty seems to favor her, perhaps let her stay in the palace."
Li Yuan visibly relaxa.
He forced a smile. "This was my fault. I'll do as the Empress says." I nodded. Still, a girl of such loose conduct shouldn't go unpunished. Otherwise, others might follow her example. How about 15 slaps to the face, then assign her a low-ranking position? This. Li Yuan hesitated, glancing at He Mian, who was shaking her head furiously. Eventually, he turned away and agreed through gritted teeth. As the palace maids dragged He Mian out, she sobbed so hard she nearly fainted. I lowered my eyes and smiled. "Well now, let's see you enter the palace all pure and clean this time. So, what rank will His Majesty grant her?" I asked. Li Yuan said nothing. He Hongya answered first. "How about 6th rank Baolin, and she can stay in my palace?" Li Yuan hesitated. "Isn't that too low?" I gave him a look of mock surprise. "Your Majesty, this was a capital offense. If we give her too much status, what will others think? Besides, she's your consort's blood relative. Would she really suffer under your consort's care?" "Exactly." He Hongya added. "I'll assign Haitang to her. She needs to learn palace rules, after all." Li Yuan froze. "But Haitang's your trusted maid. Are you sure?" "Only someone seasoned knows how to guide a newcomer. Even for your Majesty's peace of mind, I'll make sure Mian is well taken care of." Haitang glanced at Li Yuan, then quickly knelt. "Your Majesty, I don't want to leave my lady." "Since when does a servant get a say?" I said coldly. He Hongya gave Haitang a frosty look. "It's settled. From now on, you'll be with Mian." As they spoke, He Mian was led back in. Her once delicate face was red and swollen. It would take at least half a month to recover. A maid whispered, "Miss He, you should thank His Majesty and Her Majesty for their mercy." Tears in her eyes, He Mian knelt and mumbled, "Thank you, Your Majesties, for your kindness." I waved a hand. "Enough. His Majesty has named you 6th rank Baolin. Now that you're part of the palace, don't make the same mistake again." Watching her and Li Yuan exchange longing, regretful glances, I couldn't help but sneer inwardly. Bao He, your good days are just beginning.
5.
After He Mian entered the palace in such an utterly humiliating fashion, I was sure she and Li Yuan both regretted their little moment of passion in the imperial garden. To be honest, half of that was my doing. Ever since He Mian started temporarily staying in the palace, I had someone keeping an eye on her. She and Li Yuan were practically burning with love. Every time they met, it was like throwing a match into dry straw. When He Hongye found out, she said she wanted to fan the flames of their love even more. So she sprinkled some aphrodisiac on the rockery where they usually had their romantic rendezvous. Their passionate love nearly brought tears to my eyes. Not a drop of that drug went to waste. The imperial harem and the front court were deeply intertwined. Because of how He Mian came into the palace, the imperial censors gave Li Yuan a proper scolding. According to a first-hand report from Xiao Cui, the censors were out for blood. Even Consort He's father got slammed with a memorial to the throne for failing to raise his daughter properly. Ah, civil officials and their words sharp as blades. Once they'd vented enough, I passed a message to my father, asking him to speak up for Li Yuan. My father was pretending to be the nice guy, we all knew it. I knew it, Li Yuan knew it, and so did every court official. But still, they had no choice but to go along with it, noses wrinkled in disgust.
See?
When you have power, you really can do whatever you want. For instance, I knew since childhood that I was destined to marry the crown prince. Whether his name was Li Yuan or Li whoever, it didn't matter. What mattered was that I would be the crown princess. Li Yuan and I were childhood sweethearts in name only, each with our own agenda. That we couldn't make it work was simply fate. As for He Hongye, she was Li Yuan's most favored consort on paper. When she brought her cousin into the palace, and that cousin ended up with the emperor, of course people mocked her. I always say, humility is a virtue. Consort, he just loved too much pomp and flair. No wonder everyone was waiting to watch her fall. But me? I kept a low profile. Because He Mian's face was still swollen, I ordered her to rest and wait until she looked presentable before showing her face again. Today, Consort he finally brought her dear cousin to formally pay respects to me. The other consorts had been looking forward to this for days. Even Consort Jing, who was sick more often than not, showed up. By the time Miss Mian arrived, the palace ladies had been waiting with bated breath. Consort he gave a proper curtsy, then sat down just below me. He Mian, whether out of foolishness or boldness, followed and sat beside her. Bao He, have you been studying the palace rules these past few days? I asked. She stared at me blankly. It was Haitang who jumped in to respond, sharp as ever. Replying to Your Majesty, Bao he has been recovering from her injuries. His Majesty said she could learn the rules after she's healed. I cast a cool glance at Haitang. Xiao Cui immediately stepped forward and slapped her across the face. Her Majesty asked Bao He, what right does a servant have to answer for her? Only after the slap did I slowly say, Xiao Cui, how many times have I told you not to be so hasty? I understand, Your Majesty. It was my mistake. Fine, come back. We wouldn't want to frighten Bao He and make things difficult for His Majesty. Haitang knelt on the ground, head lowered, begging for forgiveness. Haitang, you've served the consort for many years. Even if Bao he doesn't understand the rules, you should. Go receive your punishment after this. I waved a hand. Take your mistress where she belongs. Now that she's part of the palace, she's family. I won't say more, but you'd better keep that in mind. All the other consorts quickly rose and bowed. Your Majesty's words are wise. Enough with the formalities. Be seated. The room was instantly filled with flying glances and subtle expressions. Only He Hongye seemed deaf to it all, calmly sipping her tea, without looking up once. These days, everyone was speculating about how she really felt about her cousin. If she liked her, why hadn't she spoken up while the girl was being humiliated? If she disliked her, why had she given her most trusted maid to her? After an entire morning of passive-aggressive remarks, Poor Baolin, he looked like a lamb thrown to the wolves, nearly burst into tears on the spot. When I felt the atmosphere was about right, I gave Xiaotsue a subtle nod to end the performance. She stepped in to smooth things over, and I let the other consorts return to their own quarters. Consort He, stay. I have a few matters to discuss with you. 6. Once the others had gone, only He Hongya and I remained in the room. She finally let out a snort of laughter. My cousin's been crying day and night. His Majesty's visited several times, and every time he pretends to make polite conversation with me. I feel like the villainess from an opera, always breaking up lovers. Li Yuan still hadn't consolidated his power. He couldn't afford to offend He Hongya, whose family controlled the military. Nor could he risk alienating me, backed as I was by the old aristocracy. So the one he loved had to suffer in silence. I personally poured He Hongya a cup of tea. Quietly, I said, Haidang can't stay by her side any longer. He Hongya let out a cold laugh. It's not just Haidang, is it? You said you trusted that imperial physician, right? I called him to check my pulse. I've trained in martial arts since I was a child. My body's always been strong. But guess what he said? My heart sank. Li Yuan, You really are the famed genius of Great Zhou, she sneered. So clever. With hatred in her voice, she continued, the physician said I've come into contact with too many harmful substances. I may never be able to conceive again, and even if I do, I might not carry to term. Her eyes were like knives. Grinding her teeth, she said, I always thought it was you who caused my miscarriage. But no, the true culprit was His Majesty. He's been guarding against me for a long time. Li Yuan, if you weren't emperor, you could have made a fine villain. When it comes to ruthlessness and betrayal, no one beats you. He really is cold-blooded, I said darkly. He Hongya's expression dimmed. This time around, I refused to make the same mistakes. She turned away, her tone solemn, as if she'd finally made up her mind. Xia Waner, in my past life, I saw you as my greatest enemy. But I know your heart was never truly with Li Yuan. This life, I'll follow your lead, but only if you help me get revenge. My brother's legs, my unborn child's life. I want Li Yuan and He Mianyan to pay for every drop of blood. The way she said it, you'd think I didn't have a grudge against Li Yuan too. In our past life, he forced my son into rebellion, used it as an excuse to wipe out my father and brother, and imprison my son before killing me. Back then, I accepted it all. I made my move, I lost. Fair enough. But now I've been given another chance. How could I possibly let that mud of an emperor off the hook? He Hongya and I were a match made in hell, scheming, bitter, and perfectly aligned. Right away, we started plotting. Your cousin's a fool, I said. Why not start with her? He Hongya smiled. I'm His Majesty's beloved. Now that my cousin's made a fool of me, I think I'm entitled to a little temper. I looked at her meaningfully. Just don't overdo it. If the emperor starts pitying her, all our effort goes down the drain.
She scoffed.
Let him try. My father's guarding the northwest borders. The southern barbarians are restless. It's a time of crisis. You think he'd dare challenge me over He Mianyan? She had a point. Li Yuan was like a turtle, slow, patient, and always hiding in his shell. In our past life, he waited until both our families had fallen before turning on us. In this life, he'll probably wait even longer. 7. In the blink of an eye, 3 months passed. He Hongya played the role of the favored consort to perfection, and poor Mianyan suffered terribly for it. According to Xiaotsue, one day Baolin he came crying to the emperor, but before she could even say a word, consort he showed up. Star-crossed lovers torn apart, it really was hard to watch. I could tell He Mianyan had just about reached her limit. Her expression twisted every time she came to pay respects. Seeing that the play had nearly run its course, I arranged for someone to whisper in her ear. The next day, He Hongya said to me, She's so dumb I can hardly bear to look at her. The maid you instructed merely planted a few hints, and she actually went and bought poison. I asked her, You were planning to drink it yourself? She nodded. You can't catch a wolf without sacrificing the lamb. But your health's already not great, I said, frowning. Why risk yourself like that? Wouldn't it be better to turn the tables and hit back with the same method? She blinked. You always say things so complicated. I didn't read that many books. I sighed. If you take the poison, Li Yuan might still find a way to defend He Mianmian. But if we use that poison and let someone else fall under suspicion, that's far more effective. If you ask me, the Empress Dowager, with her robust constitution, can handle a little poison. He Hongya raised an eyebrow. That's a solid idea, but how would He Mianmian end up poisoning the Empress Dowager? I smiled. Whether she actually poisons the Empress Dowager isn't the point. What matters is that everyone thinks she did. 3 days later, the Empress Dowager was found unconscious from poisoning. The imperial physicians worked tirelessly to save her. His Majesty was furious and ordered a full investigation. I personally led the search, turning the palace upside down, only to find several packets of poison hidden in Baolin He's quarters. Before the Empress Dowager regained consciousness, He Hongya and I were seated at Li Yuan's sides. He Mianmian and Haitang were trembling on their knees in the center of the hall. Tears poured down He Mianmian's cheeks before she even spoke. Your Majesty, save me. I almost laughed. Seriously, girl? At this point, the fire's already licking your feet. What exactly do you expect Li Yuan to do? Let his own mother suffer just to save you? Everyone present knew the truth. He Mianmian probably wasn't the real culprit, but the poison was found in her room. After a thorough examination, the physician carefully reported, Your Majesty, the poison found is not the one that afflicted the Empress Dowager. Li Yuan visibly relaxed. We almost wronged Mianmian. Empress, you've been too reckless. I sneered inwardly. Li Yuan, you're celebrating too soon. Before he could even order her release, the physician added, But Her Majesty was meticulous. She also had us examine the incense burners in the Dowager's quarters. The Empress Dowager wasn't poisoned through food or drink. The poison was catalyzed by incense, triggered by toxic residue on someone's body. Just now, we examined the sachet consort he was carrying. The toxin came from there. Li Yuan froze. His face darkened as he snapped his head toward He Hongya. Consort He, how dare you attempt to harm the Empress Dowager? He Hongya immediately dropped to her knees. Your Majesty, I wouldn't dare. I've been framed, please believe me. Li Yuan hurled his teacup at her feet. I imagine he was secretly delighted. If consort he was found guilty, he could finally weaken the He family's military power and rescue his sweetheart. 2 birds, 1 stone. Too bad for him. I had something to say. Your Majesty. I helped He Hongya up and sighed, as if in disapproval. I know you're angry, but let's not be hasty. What do you mean? He Hongya turned to him, tears shimmering in her eyes. Your Majesty, the sachet was a gift from my cousin. He Mianmian, who'd still been sobbing, froze. She completely forgot to keep up the act. You're lying. How dare you? Xiao Tsue, always knowing when to act, delivered a flawless slap. Miss Mianmian got hit again. Li Yuan, stunned by yet another twist, didn't even react in time. He could only watch as she took the blow. Even when beating a dog, you have to consider its owner. But Xiao Tsue was my maid. No matter how heartbroken Li Yuan was, he had to suck it up. For the record, I wasn't calling Mianmian a dog. Seeing He Mianmian still sitting there crying, Haitang finally spoke up. That sachet passed through many hands. We can't prove Baolin, he was the one who poisoned it. Suddenly enlightened, He Mianmian exclaimed, Right. It could have been cousin trying to frame me. Li Yuan frowned, silent. Good. Stay silent. Did you think I'd leave you a loophole to escape through? I shot the physician a subtle look. He continued, Your Majesty, that's not possible. The toxin is extremely potent. If it had been added recently, consort, he would have shown symptoms long ago. It must have been laced into the fabric during production, then left to dry. Only then could it slowly, subtly poison someone over time. He Hongya burst into tears on cue. Mianmian, how could you do this to me? Only then did Li Yuan finally understand. This had been a setup from the start. And under his brilliant performance, Mian Mian had walked straight into a dead end. I didn't. Your Majesty, Li Lang. Mian Mian wailed. Li Yuan hesitated, struggling. Maybe there's a misunderstanding? Bao Lin, he has always been so gentle. Your Majesty. Hongya looked at him, eyes full of tears. The evidence is clear. Why would you? Li Yuan had already declared his judgment just moments ago. Now, facing Mian Mian's pitiful eyes and Hongya's righteous indignation, he was well and truly stuck. I curled my lips into a faint smile, staring straight at Mian Mian. This is a serious matter. It can't be dismissed lightly. Li Yuan glanced at me, hopeful. He must have thought I'd turn on Hongya right here, put on a dramatic palace showdown, and save his precious little Mian Mian. Surprise, Your Majesty. Your Empress and your consort? We're on the same team. I said gently. Bao Lin, he is young. Would she really come up with such a method herself? Perhaps someone misled her. Murdering a consort, hiding poison. It's a capital crime. Bao Lin, you'd better think carefully before you speak. No one can save you otherwise. If it had just been an attempt on consort, Li Yuan might have smoothed it over. But now, the Empress Dowager was the one in bed. There was no covering it up. Mian Mian looked at me, eyes filled with confusion and fear. The little maid beside her tugged on her sleeve and whispered something. Suddenly, her eyes lit up. She shouted. It was Haitang. She did it. What? Bao Lin. Li Yuan and Haitang were both stunned. I nearly burst out laughing.
See?
With the right push, even an idiot can be immensely useful. Mian Mian had never let me down. She turned away, not daring to meet Haitang's eyes. Haitang, she resented my cousin. That's why she did it. Your Majesty, I didn't know anything. If the timing had been better, I bet Li Yuan would have started cursing on the spot. His face went stone cold, chest heaving, but no words came out. Love really does make people blind. Li Yuan, your taste in women. I honestly don't know what to say.
8.
While chaos unfolded outside, the Empress Dowager woke up. Perfect timing. She's quite the formidable woman. I told you she was tough. Poison one day, roaring the next. Who was it? Who tried to kill me? Xiao Cui stepped forward and relayed everything in detail. The Empress Dowager flew into a rage. The late emperor always said the harem must not harbor shameless women. Bao Lin, he seduced the emperor in the imperial garden, and now she's poisoning people too. Banish her to the cold palace, then grant her death. Mother, Mian Mian doesn't deserve to die. Li Yuan pleaded. The dowager coughed twice and said sternly, You're being foolish. What use do you have for a woman this vile? Clearly, Li Yuan didn't know his mother well enough. Back when the late emperor was alive, she was barely tolerated. It was only because she bore a promising son that she rose in rank. Every time she saw me, it was like she was staring at her mortal enemy. If it weren't for propriety, I sometimes suspected she'd want to marry Li Yuan herself, just to enjoy the full extent of his power. Now that she saw her son defending another woman? Absolutely not. Her possessive motherly instinct kicked in full force. She probably wanted to climb out of bed and strangle Mian Mian herself before anything else could go wrong. Previously, Hongya and I were her two least favorite women.
Now,
Mian Mian had clearly claimed the top spot. Li Yuan still tried to speak up for his sweetheart, but the Empress Dowager gave him no opening. He was caught between his mother and his lover. What a nightmare. But Li Yuan was no fool. In a flash, he came up with a solution. Sacrifice a pawn to protect the queen. Haitang received his signal and had no choice but to step forward and take the fall. At this point, Hongya and I were just extras. She sniffled in the corner like a tragic heroine, while I had even less reason to chime in. The Empress Dowager could carry the whole show by herself. Too bad I didn't have sunflower seeds. This drama was more entertaining than any opera. But even if Haitang took the blame, Mian Mian's days under the Empress Dowager's thumb weren't going to be pleasant. Lose your lover? Li Yuan could always find 10 more lookalikes to pine over. Lose your mother? You can't just stuff someone back into the womb and respawn. So in the end, it was still Mian Mian who'd suffer. Star-crossed lovers, how tragic.
Ha ha ha. Yes.
It was I who poisoned the consort out of resentment. I acted alone. The Empress Dowager's suffering was my fault. Baolin, he knew nothing. Haitang declared. Li Yuan immediately followed up. How dare you? Drag her out and beat her to death with sticks. The Empress Dowager's eyes bulged with fury. Nonsense. You're just a servant. What gives you the right to poison anyone? Haitang kowtowed and cried. Every word I've said is true. I only wanted to spare others. I've served the consort for years. My family is poor. When she gave me to Baolin He without a word, and then treated Baolin He with scorn and violence, I was beaten too. I'm human too. I have feelings. In a moment of weakness, I made a terrible mistake. I deserve death. With that, she flung herself into a pillar and died on the spot. Blood everywhere. The Empress Dowager was so shocked she almost choked. Outrageous. Execute her whole clan. Chop her body up and feed it to the dogs. He Mian Mian was terrified, collapsing to the floor in tears. Seeing that the climax had arrived, I daintily wiped my mouth. Time for Her Majesty to take center stage. If Haitang confessed, then perhaps Baolin He truly is innocent. Li Yuan's brow finally relaxed, only for me to follow up with. But Baolin He, how do you explain the poison found in your quarters? He Mian Mian froze. No stammering. You've been in the palace long enough to know how to speak properly. Where did that deadly poison come from? Even if you haven't used it yet, possessing it shows ill intent. As Empress, I cannot allow a venomous woman like you to remain at His Majesty's side. Your Majesty, I support the Empress Dowager's decree. Send Baolin He to the cold palace. I gave Li Yuan a discreet glance. He immediately caught my meaning. Cold palace meant exile, not execution. Death was permanent. Cold palace was negotiable. The Empress is right, he declared. And with that, we finally calmed the furious Empress Dowager. Though she was spared death, He Mian Mian still received a severe beating before being dragged off horizontally to the cold palace. Li Yuan looked like he was about to cry from heartbreak. The pain of tragic love. I was sure he was already plotting to bring her back once his power was solidified, and maybe wipe out the rest of the harem in the process. Your Majesty, I said gently, I'll send an imperial physician to check on her. Don't worry, I'll manage the cold palace situation. Once Her Majesty the Dowager has calmed down, we can bring Baolin He back. Li Yuan patted my hand and sighed. Zitong, having you is my greatest blessing. I smiled coldly in my heart. You're celebrating far too soon, Your Majesty.
9.
The poisoning of the Empress Dowager was no small matter. He Hongya was also punished with a suspension of her monthly allowance for 3 months for failing to manage her household properly. When I went to visit her, she was out in the courtyard, confidently practicing her swordplay. Your swordwork's not bad. Of course. She raised her brows and grinned at me. Back home, I was the best at martial arts. My father used to say that if I had been born a man, I'd have made my mark on the battlefield. She put down the sword, grabbed my handkerchief, and used it to wipe her sweat. This handkerchief of yours smells lovely. I smiled. You like it? I'll send you a few tomorrow. You've been visiting me every day. Aren't you afraid the Emperor will start getting suspicious? My aunt was the late Empress, my grandmother the eldest daughter of Emperor Wen. When it comes to palace connections, Li Yuan doesn't hold a candle to me. In my past life, I was too focused on securing my son's position as the legitimate heir of the Empress. I believed he was destined to become crown prince. That blind faith gave Li Yuan the chance to push me into a dead end, step by step. My cousin, He Hongya said, shaking her head, was truly, unbelievably stupid. To have lost to someone like her, it's hard to swallow. I sneered. We didn't lose to He Mian Mian. In terms of cunning and capability, she's not even worthy of shining our shoes. I looked toward the lush begonia blooming in the courtyard and sighed. We were defeated by imperial power itself. My gaze sharpened. My brothers were never as talented as I was, even from a young age. My grandfather once said, if I had been born a man, I would have led the Xie family to even greater heights. But alas, you and I were born women, left to rot in the depths of the inner palace. This world is truly unjust. How many men in this world are actually more capable than us? Yet we're forced to live at their mercy. He Hongya's eyes flickered as she let out a bitter laugh.
Exactly.
Why should my entire fate hinge on my husband or my family? My family wanted me in the palace, so I became concubine to a stranger. When they told me to prioritize the clan, I had to fight tooth and nail for them. My uncle is completely useless, doesn't understand military strategy, doesn't lift a finger, yet he gets to climb to the top on my back.
Yes.
Why indeed? If I've been given this second chance, then I will no longer let others dictate my life. He Hongya, when you say you want to be a general, do you mean it? She gave me a glare. Of course I mean it. I lowered my voice, serious. Then what if I told you, I want to be emperor? What? She was so shocked she knocked over her teacup. Even though no one was around, she still instinctively lowered her voice. Do you even know what you're saying? We both saw Li Yuan's rule last time. His talents were nothing special, he's not even as capable as me. If someone like him could sit securely on the throne, why can't I? Just because I'm a woman. I met her gaze steadily. I'm done making wedding gowns for others. If talent and merit are what truly matter, then I say, let the best one rise. And I'm going to try. She stared at me in astonishment for a long time, then murmured, let the best one rise, the worthy shall rule. Suddenly, she slammed her palm on the table. All right. If you really become emperor, then I'll don my armor and take the battlefield for you. But you'd better make me your great general. I raised a brow. Then you'll need to prove your skills to me first. She dropped her voice into a theatrical growl. Forget Han Xian and Zhao Zilong. If they'd ever met me, they'd have been crushed under my boots. Now that He Hongya and I were aligned in purpose, everything I did became even more strategic and clear. On the 28th of October, the first snow fell on the capital. Li Yuan, usually in excellent health, suddenly fell ill. I remarked that the timing was strange and ordered the imperial physicians to conduct a thorough examination, but they found nothing. When the Empress Dowager heard the news, she braved the snow and wind to rush over and scold me. Then, she sent her newly favored Taoist priest to tend to Li Yuan. He Hongya and I exchanged a subtle glance. We both remembered this man. In our past life, he had caused quite a stir. Back then, I had stopped Li Yuan from taking the pills he offered, and the Empress Dowager scolded me for it. 2 years later, when she became gravely ill, it was finally discovered that the Taoist had been nothing but a charlatan. His pills were laced with slow-acting poison. At first, they made one feel energized and healthy, but by the time symptoms appeared, it was already too late. He was eventually sentenced to execution by dismemberment. The Empress Dowager, despite hanging on for half a month, still died in the end. But in this life, I won't be the one to waste energy and get no thanks for it. Since mother and son are so close, why not let them take the pills together, cultivate immortality together, and ascend to paradise together?
10.
By the 3rd month of the new year, He Hongya's father returned in glory after capturing the southern barbarian chief on the battlefield. Li Yuan, though clearly displeased, had no choice but to issue rewards and further honor his beloved consort in the harem. To his credit, he hadn't forgotten poor He Mianmian, still wasting away in the cold palace. He assigned her father a cushy post. The southern barbarians were already defeated, so rounding up the remaining stragglers was a light-duty mission. The plan was for her father to return in triumph, earn a few medals, and then beg for his daughter's release. But if things went that smoothly, then what's the point of He Hongya being reborn? She had already spoken with her father in advance. When it came time to pursue the last of the stragglers, General He accidentally pushed his cousin, He Mianmian's father, straight into the front lines. And the man didn't disappoint. In hot pursuit of a fleeing enemy, he charged right into an ambush. It was General He himself who had to lead the rescue party. By the time they dragged him out, his arms and legs were broken. He wouldn't be setting foot on any battlefield again anytime soon.
Poor Mian Mian.
A golden opportunity dangled right before her, and her father let it slip through his fingers. Back to the cold palace she went, to chew on stale gruel and sleep on cold stone. When He Hongya came to see me, she was laughing so hard she nearly choked. You have no idea how stupid my uncle is. My father laid the trap, and the idiot walked straight into it without a second thought. I saw the emperor's face twist from fury. He even tried to comfort me, told me not to be too upset. Upset? I've been laughing in my sleep. I smiled and shook my head. And that's enough for you? Your uncle was just a pawn. The real threat is still alive and well.
She scoffed.
I've seen the way His Majesty enjoys his medicine, so cheerfully. He won't be well for much longer. She sighed. If you hadn't stopped me in our last life, he wouldn't have lived as long as he did. So let's wish His Majesty a speedy journey to the afterlife. After this victory, the He family was on fire, boiling oil on a roaring flame. General He's military achievements were outstanding, and he became a thorn in Li Yuan's side. Perhaps it was the pills clouding his mind, but Li Yuan started growing irrational. And, to my astonishment, he set his sights on me. Zitong, he said one day, wrapping an arm around my shoulder with unearned affection. We've been married for 8 years now. He sighed as if trying to draw sympathy, his tone nostalgic. Our son has already started reading and learning. Time really flies. I gave a sigh of my own. Your Majesty, we are husband and wife. If something's on your mind, why not say it directly? Li Yuan smiled warmly, but the whites of his eyes were dull, his pupils murky, his complexion waxy. What a fine advertisement for his treasured pills. I'm feeling more and more unwell lately, and I worry deeply for Zheng'er's future. Your Majesty is still in your prime. With you and me as his parents, what could possibly stand in his way? Li Yuan looked at me with solemn gravity. The He family's gotten far too powerful. Consort He is becoming more and more unruly in the palace. It weighs heavily on my heart. Zitong, surely you understand what I'm saying? This empire will one day belong to Zheng'er. As his parents, we must clear the path for him. I looked up in feigned confusion. Is General He not loyal to your Majesty? Loyal? Li Yuan growled. It is the duty of a minister to ease the burdens of his ruler. Now that he holds such influence and wealth, has he ever spared a thought for my position? How can one sleep peacefully with a tiger beside the bed? A fine line indeed. For my part, I don't want anyone sleeping beside me either. I understand your Majesty's concerns, but consort He has served you faithfully for years. Her love and devotion have never wavered. Li Yuan curled his lip in a sneer, his tone dark. I'll make sure she's compensated when the time comes.
Oh?
What kind of compensation? A poisoned cup of wine, perhaps? One to match the one he gave her cousin? Li Yuan was ruthless, cold, calculating, a man not worth trusting. After that conversation, Li Yuan seemed convinced he had shared his deepest thoughts with me. He sat back smugly, waiting for me and consort He to go at each other's throats, so he could sit back and watch the tigers fight. He thought dangling Zheng'er's future in front of me would be enough to manipulate me. But unfortunately for him, I've walked this road before. As He Hongya would say, why is he so confident? Exactly. Why was Li Yuan so confident that a few vague remarks could control me? In our past life, even with years of diligence and political maneuvering, he spent over a decade pulling us down. Now, in this life, he seemed to be in even more of a rush. He Hongya casually poured herself a drink. His body may be failing, but I think the poisons finally reached his brain. I curled my lips into a slow smile. Li Yuan's health really was deteriorating. I still remembered the ingredients in those pills. And to speed up their effect, I had added a little something extra myself. In this life, let's just say the results were accelerated. 11. On the 13th of June, the summer heat was suffocating. The first to collapse was the Empress Dowager. She may have been tenacious for her age, but after being poisoned again and again, even the strongest person would break. With her latest poisoning, Li Yuan flew into yet another fury. I once again launched a full investigation. After examining her, the imperial physician trembled as he spoke. It appears the Empress Dowager's body has been worn down by prolonged, repeated exposure to poison. Li Yuan's face turned even darker. Treat her with everything you've got. Then he turned to me and snapped, Empress, I entrusted the harem to you. This is how you manage it? My mother's life hangs by a thread. Do you not bear responsibility? What a lunatic. If your mother wants to take poison every day, what am I supposed to do? Dig it out of her mouth? Your Majesty.
I
have something to report. Li Yuan shot me a cold glare, but said nothing. While Her Majesty the Empress Dowager was unconscious, I searched her quarters and found this. I took the pill box from Xiao Cui, my expression full of solemn sorrow. This was the Dowager's treasured medicine. I never dared touch it before, but with the situation so urgent, I took the liberty of having it examined. Li Yuan froze. Is it poisoned? Your Majesty, the pills are not poisonous. The physician's response eased Li Yuan's nerves, if only slightly. But under no circumstances should they be consumed. What did you say? Li Yuan accidentally knocked over a teacup. The porcelain shattered on the ground. Everyone in the room immediately knelt. The air went so still, you could hear a pin drop. Speak. 3 words, gritted out from between clenched teeth. This pill appears to boost energy and vigor, but in reality, it's no different than killing the goose for the golden egg. It consumes the very essence of life. The Dowager has taken too much for too long. Now, I'm afraid it's... Silence. In a rage, Li Yuan kicked the physician so hard he rolled across the floor. But the fury overtook him, and he collapsed, unconscious. Ah, what chaos. With Li Yuan unconscious, I became the de facto ruler of the harem. I immediately ordered the fraudulent Taoist arrested and commanded the physicians to treat the Empress Dowager and Li Yuan with all they had. In private, I added a little something extra to Li Yuan's already fragile body, just enough to keep him in bed for a good while. At his sickbed, He Hongye and I sat on either side. How's the Empress Dowager? I asked. He Hongye curled her lips. She'll probably last another few days. If His Majesty wakes up quickly, he might just catch her final breath. Time really flies, I murmured. I glanced at He Hongye, her lips crimson under the candlelight, gleaming like blood. Flies, she said softly. I still feel like it's dragging. Li Yuan was, in the end, fortunate. He woke up in time to witness the Empress Dowager's final moments. As for the Taoist, his end matched what happened in our previous life. He was merely waiting for Li Yuan to pass judgment. After this incident, the last shred of energy in Li Yuan's body seemed to vanish. He remained bedridden for days, unable to rise. A country cannot go a day without a ruler. Naturally, the crown prince had to act as regent. He was still young, and with the emperor gravely ill, it fell to me, the empress, to help manage the empire. After all my years of planning, I had finally reached the moment. I could now extend my hand into the heart of the court. The day my father came to see me, I was seated behind a desk, reviewing memorials. Your Majesty, he said, there is something I cannot understand. There's no need to ask, Father. Whatever you're thinking, it's exactly what I've already decided. My father's eyes widened in shock. Your Majesty, are you truly going to defy the will of the world? What is right or wrong? I looked down at him from above. Father, once I sit on that throne, right and wrong are whatever I say they are. The crown prince will come of age one day, he argued. You'll naturally become the Empress Dowager. Why take such a dangerous path now? Father, I said quietly. When I was a girl, grandfather always said that when it came to writing and strategy, No young man in the capital could match me. So, why should I spend my life making wedding gowns for others? You're a woman. How can a woman rule a nation? I looked at him for a long time, until he finally broke eye contact. Then I said, "Why not? There's no precedent." "Then let me be the first." "Father, I can't turn back now. If you're willing, stay and help me in court. If not, submit your resignation and withdraw. From now on, you'll have no part in the Sief family's affairs." My father staggered back a few steps, his face ashen. He stared at me, stunned and uncertain. Finally, he bowed and said, "The Sief family will follow your majesty to the end."
12.
While Li Yuan was recovering, I visited his bedside every day with memorials in hand. At first, I consulted him on every matter. Then, it became major matters I'd notify him. Minor matters I handled myself. Gradually, my hand reached further into court affairs. The Sief family was already one of the top noble clans in Great Zhou, with connections across the imperial court. With their backing, even if there were some whispers of dissent, the ministers held their tongues. Li Yuan was still young. If he focused on recuperating, he might recover. At the very least, he could limp along for a few more years. One day, He Hongya asked if I had a plan. I gave a mysterious smile. The mountain hermit always has his tricks. She rolled her eyes. "Ugh, you bookish types always love your riddles. Warm beds breed weak men. Isn't your delicate, darling cousin still rotting away in the cold palace?" At that, He Hongya raised an eyebrow, then burst out laughing. "You really know how to make full use of everything, don't you?" "Of course. Thriftiness is the most basic virtue of an empress." So I had someone bring little Mian Mian out of the cold palace and send her to Li Yuan's bedside. It had been 2 years since they'd last seen each other. As soon as they laid eyes on one another, tears flowed like rivers. Like the cowherd and the weaver girl reunited on the Bridge of Magpies. So touching.
Truly.
"Li Lang, you've lost weight. Mian Mian, so have you." Of course they lost weight. One had been eating slow-acting poison for a year. The other had spent over 2 years in exile. If they hadn't lost weight, I'd be impressed by their constitution. I said gently, that His Majesty needed someone close to care for him. So I brought Mian Mian over from the cold palace. I didn't report it in advance. Please don't blame me, Your Majesty. Li Yuan had a soft, fragrant lover in his arms. Why would he care about details? "Zidong, how thoughtful of you." "Oh, I've got plenty more thoughtfulness where that came from. You'll see." Per my instruction, He Hongya kept up her ruthless performance in the palace. Whenever she was bored, she made sure to torment little Mian Mian a bit. And the maid I assigned to Mian Mian? Her job was to stir the pot. "Your ladyship," she whispered, "if you bore His Majesty a child, would the consort still dare humiliate you like this?" That's exactly why I like people like He Mian Mian, so easy to bait. Just dangle a hook and she bites. She remembered that line, all right. She slipped aphrodisiac-laced medicine into Li Yuan's meal. The man, already hanging on by a thread, suddenly acted like he was 20 again.
Disgusting.
Truly eye-searing. The kind of love that burns your very soul. I warned the imperial physician not to tell him the truth. So Li Yuan thought he was miraculously rejuvenated by love. The power of romance. The man who couldn't even sit upright was now strolling around the garden with his beloved consort. A love story so intense, it could make anyone weep. But even in his love-drunken haze, Li Yuan remembered he was still an emperor. He called me over one day. "Empress, thank you for your tireless efforts on my behalf. I'm fully recovered now. From now on, there's no need for you to handle memorials. The crown prince is still young. Focus on raising him instead.
See that?
Use the donkey to grind the mill, then kill it when the job's done. Power is easy to hand out, but taking it back?
Not so simple."
"Your Majesty, I shall do as you command." By the time Li Yuan tried to claw back control, I'd already used that window to place an entire web of loyal allies. I didn't need my own retinue. The Sief family had enough. At this point, The entire court bore traces of the Empress Xie's will. And with the He family quietly supporting me from behind, Li Yuan, you might as well wait for death. When he returned to court, it hit him. Everything was just like when he'd first ascended the throne. Everywhere he turned, he was restrained. No matter how he thought it through, he couldn't figure out what went wrong. And maybe he never would. Maybe he'd die still believing it was just a string of bad luck, never realizing that the woman at his side had been plotting to take his throne all along. When Li Yuan got frustrated in court, he brought the fire back to the harem. And wouldn't you know it, Mian Mian whispered just the right things in his ear. So his temper exploded, right onto He Hongya. But today's consort, he wasn't the same helpless woman from before. Backed by the He family, she wasn't afraid anymore.
How dare you?
I'll send you to the cold palace. I happened to arrive just in time to hear this. He Hongya reclined lazily in her chair, didn't even bother looking at him. Cold palace?
Fine.
I'm not moving. You can have someone take down the name plaque from my door. You. Sister, you're going too far, said Mian Mian, ever the perfect little helper, trying to smooth things over for Li Yuan. But He Hongya only smiled sweetly, rose to her feet, and slapped her cousin across the face. And who do you think you are, talking to me like that? He Hongya was a martial artist. That slap sent delicate little Mian Mian sprawling to the floor. 2 teeth flew out with a clink. Mian Mian, have I not treated you well enough? You've always had your eyes on what's mine, my position, my family, my life. But tell me, are you even worthy? She turned to the guards. Guards. Li Yuan was livid. He opened his mouth to explode, but the fire rushed straight to his head. His mouth twisted. His eye drooped. He collapsed on the spot. Oh dear, He Hongya said, her grin wide and dazzling. His Majesty has had a stroke. 13. This time, Li Yuan's collapse truly marked the end. His oil burned out, his lamp snuffed. I revealed the evidence I'd long since prepared and had the gap-toothed Balin he promptly arrested. Night had fallen. The moon hung like a cold hook in the sky. I sat beside Li Yuan's bed, holding a bowl of medicine. Your Majesty, Your Majesty. Li Yuan opened his clouded eyes, struggling to focus on me. Balin, he is dying, huff, huff. He couldn't speak anymore, only stared at me as drool slid down his cheek. So this was the fate of an emperor. Consort, he is handling Balin, I said gently. They're sisters after all. I'm sure she'll be efficient. Poison you poison, he rasped. I smiled. Are you talking about Balin, What a pity, it was my oversight that she gave you those aphrodisiacs. Now your body's ruined. The imperial physicians say you'll never leave this bed again. Li Yuan's eyes widened in panic, face turning purple from the effort of trying to speak. Just then, the door creaked open. He Hongya stepped in, brushing the dust off her sleeves. It's done. She gave me a playful glance. I told you we should have handled it directly. You had to be all elaborate about it. Murdering the emperor is a capital crime, I replied lightly. We can't stain our own hands, can we? Though Li Yuan could no longer speak, he could still see and hear. He stared at us both, panic filling his gaze. He Hongya tossed her blood-stained handkerchief right onto his face. What are you staring at? Didn't expect it, huh? Xie Wan'er and I have been allies for a long time now. Li Yuan trembled uncontrollably, like a fish out of water. I picked up another handkerchief and gently wiped the sweat from his temples. Looking into his terrified eyes, I whispered sweetly, Don't worry, Your Majesty. I'll take good care of the empire for you. You can rest easy and die. Li Yuan's health plummeted again, and this time, he never returned to court. Balin, he was convicted of attempted regicide. Her entire family was executed. Her parents were beheaded on the spot. General He, however, had long-standing military merit. And consort, he had served by the emperor's side for many years, so neither was implicated. Still, General, he felt disgraced. He surrendered his command and handed over the tiger tally. The crown prince was still a child. The emperor bedridden, unable to rule. The responsibility of governance naturally fell once again to me. The first time I held court behind a curtain, It was He Hongya herself who helped arrange my robes. I tucked a stray strand behind her ear and said with a smile, "Consort He, you'll be leaving the palace soon." "I'll wait for the good news," she replied. In the 7th year of Jianan, northern Liao invaded. My consort put on armor and rode into battle. Before leaving, she disguised herself, claiming to be a minor member of the He family. It was only upon reaching the front lines that she revealed her true identity. Consort, he was a brilliant tactician. In just 3 months, she not only repelled the enemy, but captured the crown prince of northern Liao alive. She marched the army straight through the enemy capital, reclaiming all the territory the late emperor had once lost. When she returned in triumph, I personally went to the city gates to welcome her home. White horse, silver armor, a cold-faced woman with a spear in hand. From afar, she waved to me. I couldn't make out her expression, but I imagined she was smiling. During the imperial commendation ceremony, He Hongya presented her war achievements and said with a grin, "Your Majesty, I have not failed you." At the celebratory banquet, we both wandered into the palace's small garden, as if by unspoken agreement. "When do you plan to declare yourself emperor?" she asked. "I already am the Grand General," she added. "Still one step ahead of you." I smiled. Yes, yes, my great general. I'll be counting on your protection." She laughed along with me. The moonlight was deep. Shadows from the trees danced across the stone path. "This all feels like a dream," He Hongya said softly. "I never thought we'd end up here." She pulled a small pouch from her sleeve and handed it to me. "Look, desert flowers. I brought them back just for you. You've never been to the northern frontier, but now, having seen these blooms, it's as if you visited my homeland." I stared at the withered little flower in her hand, overcome with emotion. With this great victory, there was hardly anyone left in court who could oppose me. It was only a matter of time before I claimed the throne. As He Hongya had said, this really did feel like a dream. Now, I was Xie Wan'er, Empress-in-waiting, the next ruler of the empire. And she was He Hongya, triumphant general returning from battle. Whether it was right or wrong, what did it matter anymore? 14. In the 10th year of Jianan, Emperor Ping of Zhou passed away. 3 months after ascending the throne, the young crown prince, realizing his own limitations, abdicated governance to Empress Xie. In the 4th month of the same year, Empress Xie declared herself emperor. History remembers her as Emperor Wen of Zhou. On the day I ascended the throne in my dragon robes, He Hongya stood foremost among the military officers, leading all the court in solemn bows. "Long live the emperor! Long live the emperor! Long live the emperor 10,000 years!" She raised her head and met my eyes. Though our journey had been filled with hardship, we had finally achieved what we'd once only dreamed of. From here on, the road would be clear. She and I could walk beneath the moon together. The end.